Very good. All right. Well, most of actually, I think all of the artists this week are from Asia. And I have always been deeply in love with the Japanese aesthetic. And so
Mhm.
quite a few of these artists are from there. And then also I found another Korean artist who was dealing with the issues that we talked about last week, with the issues of um, being a migrant and being in a new situation, a new surrounding, a new culture, new friends, and all the things that come around with that. So I started collecting works that or artists that kind of dealt somewhat with that. You are here, investigating the perspective of self and the relationship with other. And the first one is Hae Young, a South Korean, born in 1971. She does a lot of very interesting installation artworks. I just picked one in particular to work with today. But the blurb on her says that she's a South Korean artist. She lives and works in Berlin and Seoul. Yang often uses standard household objects in her works and tries to liberate them from their functional context and to apply other connotations and meanings to them. Linguistic and didactic processes are central features of her work. Much of Yang's artwork attempt to provide sensory experiences through abstract narratives.
Mhm.
Now, reading that's a lot of art speak there, but what I was very interested in is the context that gives things meaning, because I think that that's very much how our mind works. And that's what samskaras are. They are our context from which we move. And the artist here
Mhm.
really sees that and understands this and actually asks some of those questions. Why do we move? Why do we act? Why do we relocate? So she says that for her current presentation at the Bass, a museum in Miami Beach, she asked the curators what the region's famously multicultural residents have in common. A particular holiday, a certain food? Not really, they told her. But isn't there any commonality you can think of? She
Oh,
asked. The curators looked at one another.
uh-huh.
Hurricanes, they said, half jokingly.
Wow.
So, in this idea of barriers and separations, I really enjoyed the fact that in her art she's exploring the oneness, exploring the connections. How is it that we can connect? How is it that we can find a common ground? And for me, that has been my spiritual life. When I grew
Mhm.
up early on as a fundamentalist Christian, the world was always broken. There was always something wrong with the world. And some people were good people and some people were bad people. And, those who were saved were good people and those who weren't saved were bad people. And I was always very discontent with that growing up. I did not like living in a world where I had to determine the value of every person when I met them. Is this a good or a bad person? Are they a saved person or a lost person? And this one of the beautiful things I think about studying the Eastern philosophies is their unity. They're not concerned with those things. They talk about people as human, and that is the group, and that is our commonality. And when we study that a little bit more or dig into that, we begin to realize what that means. What is it to be human? And we go in, and the value of being human turns out to be that image of the divine within us, the fact that we love and recognize love, the fact that we grow and learn and improve, uh, and the fact that we're aware of our position in the world. So
Oh,
she takes a look. She took over this entire art museum. It's about a 3-story high building with a huge atrium, and she hung this exhibit. And if you look at it, it's quite beautiful, striking, lots of colors and variations. Can you see what it actually is?
mm, what it actually is, a tower of some sort or not?
Hmm. It's definitely a tower structure, yes, but it's window blinds. All of
Oh, yeah.
all those panels are window blinds laid
Wow,
in different
interesting.
configurations.
Yeah, cool.
So
Hmm.
here's what she's asking us, what is it that makes us move? How does movement affect us? When do we feel moved? Is a movement mental or physical? When we migrate, do we lose our sense of home? How do we maintain and accommodate our migratory destinies and narratives? So these are interesting questions because the movement that I see is what is our original home. The natural state for us as human beings is in the shrine of the heart, where we live in response to the universe that we know to be unreal and yet a reflection. Unreal in the sense that it's reflection, not unreal in the sense that there's nothing there, but in the fact that it's a reflection and that uh, our our best living is a spontaneous expression of what we are. And that's why we spend so much time in our practices and our studies trying to get a clear vision of who we are and what we are so that that can manifest. And so what is it that brings us around? She, in her structures, she has
Mm.
these towering structures as accumulation of narratives, which sounds exactly like the human mind.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That we've got these towering accumulations of narrative structures that have been true at different parts in our life. Some of them remain true, some of them don't. When they don't, we
Mm-hmm.
actually keep them there. We can reference them. We can place ourselves in the middle of them again and talk about that experience, but we've disregarded them. We've moved beyond them. And so she has towered these things, one layer on top of another layer, to explain kind of our changing narrative of who we are as we grow, as we age, as we learn, as we experiment and gather yet more experiences that increase our number of narratives, verify some, and disprove others. She talks about this unattainability as the remoteness of history. What does that mean? It means the things that we leave behind because they can't be attained. They can't be had. They turned out to be unviable definitions of ourself or things that didn't work out, as identities. And so we've changed. We let go. I mean, at one point in my life, I would have been known as a fundamentalist Christian minister. At another point in my life, I'd be known as a systems analyst for the CSU. At another point in my life, I'd be known as a monk of the Ramakrishna order. And so these changing and stacking narratives that aren't necessarily contradictory, but stand upon one another. And so she's trying to lay that out. And she chose the window blinds because they can become opaque or translucent, depending on how we use them. So she says transparency is a model for self-examination. It's that process of discernment, of picking up these narratives that we've discarded, looking at them, seeing their effect on us, seeing the truthiness or the falseness of them. And I really appreciated the way that she took this large room and boundaried it, with her layers of narrative window blinds of multiple colors and multiple shapes, very inviting. When you first look at it, it almost looks like staircases. You almost wanted to like climb up it. And yet, as you looked more, you saw that that's not possible. And again, that really points to the situation that we're in. These identities that we take on, uh, they're they're not tenable quite often, and they're not permanent. In the morning you get up and you're a husband and a wife, or a monk in his room, and then the day starts and you go to the office and you're something different for different people. You meet a group of friends from high school, suddenly you're another identity with another set of ideas all around. And so this translucent overlapping as the compatibility of diverse destinies. So how how we're able just to lay these layers of identity on ourselves and comfortably change from one to the other. I when I first got into the Vedanta and they started saying things like this world is unreal, that which changes is not real, the unchanging alone is real. I found that really frustrating because I couldn't find anything that would show me that was possible. That what there, I didn't see that mirrored anywhere until the idea of the dream came into the conversation as an example. And it was one that I really drew a lot of comfort from, one, because I like dreams, and I often wondered, why do we dream? What's the function of that? And I can't say for sure that this is the reason that we dream, but it certainly seems like a great reason to dream, so that we can understand how real a world can seem, and how big its problems can seem, and how real they can seem. And even though our identity is something that seems so absolute, how easily we step into a dream and completely let go of one identity and adopt a brand new one, even a different body, without even thinking about it, with no trouble at all, how easily we do that. And I think, looking at that, you begin to understand the nature of the soul, that the soul is everything. It's nothing, depending on how you want to look at it. That we can become anything and have. I have become you, the eye of the eye. I have become me. I have become every story of every animal, every rock, every plant. And I'm doing it effortlessly. And it's not bothering me at all to be all of these things at one time. So this dream, laying out there. So she says this entire conglomerate superimpose itself onto the monumental space of the middle hall in the Haus der Kunst in Munich, which served as a cultural political platform during the National Socialist regime. So again, this idea that all of this narrative, all of this identity, all of this definition, all of these limitations and restrictions, to use Swamiji's word, we've taken a vast infinite oneness, and we've broken that space up, just like she has done with all of these blinds and these borders and layers of narrative, as it were, to become who we are. And yet we're trying to return to that vast open space of freedom, where really all of these ideas and separations are removed. All the blinds are wide open, And so I think, for me, just as a playful thing, I was thinking that what would this sculpture look like if it was representing enlightenment? And I think you could leave the structure there, but you would open all the blinds so that you could see the colors, you could see the effect, you could see the boundary, but you could see through it also. You would know that it was unreal, that it was not an actual limit or an actual boundary. So that was our artist from South Korea. Masao Yamamoto, born in 1957 in Gamagori City, Aichi Prefecture in Japan. This man, wait till you see the work he's done. Just beautiful. So Yamamoto's photography suffused with sensibilities that derive from Zen Buddhism, from Shintoism, Taoism, and the Japanese aesthetic traditions. It is impossible to fully understand or discuss his work without reference to spiritual and aesthetic concepts such as emptiness, wabi-sabi, haiku, and yugen. Now, the two on there that most people wouldn't understand is wabi-sabi. So I first ran into this when I studied the 10 states, or the 10 steps to enlightenment in the Zen tradition, in the story of the bull. I don't know. I did a series of vlogs on that where I did one picture a day of these 10 steps. And we're going to look at them at one in a minute because it's in there. But wabi-sabi was introduced to me at that time. And it's this worldview centered on the acceptance of transience and imperfection. And one way you'll see that in Japanese culture is if a piece of pottery actually breaks, it is not discarded. It's repaired, and the cracks are filled in with gold. So you'll
Mm.
see that on some old pottery, and it will continue to be used. Why? Because they have this ideal that accepts transience and imperfection. They don't just throw it away. It continues on, gets repaired and carries on as it goes forward. And so I really love how they materialized that notion of of transience and imperfection into everyday objects. So that's where I first ran into that. And then this Jugend idea. Jugend is said to mean a profound, mysterious sense of beauty of the universe and the sad beauty of human suffering. Jugend suggests that beyond what can be said, but is not an allusion to another world, it is about this world, this experience. I was really caught up in this idea of different types of beauty and understanding that suffering does have a perspective from which it is beautiful. From that deep sadness. I grew up in the military, so I moved 14 times before I was 17, before I was 18, and I said goodbye to a lot of people. And one of those people in particular was my best friend, Brigitte, when I was 10, and I knew her for about 3.5 years or so. And the day that I had to leave Germany to move back to the United States when I was coming up on 14 years old, my last day spent with her was heartrending, heartrending. I just can't. To this day, it's been 50 years. And to this day, I can tell you the pain is just as present and accessible to
Mhm.
me
Mhm.
as it ever was. And yet it has changed its nature. At first in my life, it was very painful, just destructive pain. Like I never thought I would have another friend again that, really left a scar. But it's become just the way that love with boundaries feels, love
Mm.
with conditions feels. And I can see the beauty and the depth of being able to experience something so deep, even though it's a pain, even though it's a wound, that expression of something that in its essence is beauty, when it meets one of the limitations, when it meets one of the conditions or boundaries, either of our mind or our body, and is lost, that profound beauty of that loss, because the flip side of it is the deep love of what is being lost and the deep beauty of what is being lost. And so that pain indicates a beauty and something worthwhile and something valuable. So he tries to grab these very beautiful
Mm.
concepts in his works of art. And you'll see this one
Oh,
here.
oh,
It's a
wow.
photograph.
Yeah. Mm.
And in this very traditional teaching mechanism in Zen Buddhism called the story of the bull, there's 10 levels or 10 steps, 10 stages of enlightenment. And in that final picture of the 10 steps is this luminous circle. Now, this is the one by our artist here, but this next one here, that is the one from the story of the bull.
Oh,
So you see
right.
almost a direct
Mm.
reference here to
Mm.
enlightenment in his work. So
Mm.
this notion of this beautiful luminous sky with this boundary ring, which
Mm.
isn't really there. There's a story of Ramakrishna told about Ramakrishna about before he came to Earth. I don't know if it's mythical or if it's actual or not, but the story is, and the story is told that he was in the undivided absolute. He was there with Brahman, with the undivided Atman, and that he stepped over a wall in the indivisible.
Mm. Mm.
Which I
Mm.
love. I love that contradiction. And
Mhm.
so I see this ring here as being sort of significant of that boundary, non-boundary. It's like, yes, it's a boundary, but no, it's not a boundary. It can be easily crossed. And so
Mm.
I imagine that ring there is the wall in the unbounded that Ramakrishna stepped over. And when he stepped over that wall, he saw seven suns, seven stars. And he went up to one of them and leans and speaks into his ear. And those seven stars are the seven rishis, who are the writers of the Vedas, who have given us the spiritual knowledge. And the star that he spoke to was Vivekananda. And he told that star, I'm going down. Come with me. And so they both come down to the planet. And so that he took a picture that encapsulates in the real world, catches something from from the unreal world, the real world, that directly mimics this symbol for freedom, this symbol of absolute oneness with the divine. His images are like fragments from a puzzle that capture an elusive, ineffable moment, which is the very definition of a moment. That the moment is always elusive. It's never there. You can take two perspectives of the moment. Either it does not exist, which would be a rather difficult one to talk about, but you could say it's not there because when does it happen? When is it actually here before it's gone? It's immeasurable. Either there is only past and only future, and a microscopic non-existent barrier between them where the future becomes the past instantly, or there's no past and there's no future and there is only present. And so he captures that here in this beautiful picture of the bird, the freedom, the flight of the bird. And even its image cannot be defined. Even its boundaries cannot be defined. That it's got that expression of freedom. And then, of course, you've got this unchanging element in the moment, that which never changes, that which kind of holds the moment. And you look inside of ourselves, we've got these components there. There is this unchanging I that kind of holds the space, that is continuous. And then you've got the moving self, the self involved in the world of change. And that one is not so easily caught. That one, well, it's funny because it's just the opposite. That one is the one we live in. That bird has no problem feeling itself, but from the third party perspective, you see the change and you see the constant change, and that blurs the lines. That does not allow us to be caught. So he defines ineffable as being too great or extreme to be expressed or described in words. And I like how he's applying that to the bird, to this moment, that this moment is too extreme to be expressed or described in words. This is called the process of forgetting, or the production of memory. That sentence right there could be a good month's worth of meditations. This is called the process of forgetting. What is that process of forgetting? Or the production of memory? And are they one and the same? Because certainly anything being done will be remembered. So if you're forgetting, it's kind of a catch-22. The process of forgetting being caught in the production of memory. And that just shows the unreality of our stored narratives that the first artist was talking about, these stacked narratives of who and what we are. Because in old photos, the memories are completely manipulated, and it's this that interests me, and this is the reason that I do this work. So he takes these old photos and he does this art installation with trying to help us understand, like, I've definitely come to the place in my life where a lot of my biggest memories, my sharpest memories, are because there was a photograph of the event. And the things where there were no photograph, I tend to not really have memories of those things. And I've found that most of the memories that compose who I think I am are from either home videos that I've watched with my family or from pictures I've seen in albums of myself. And how fascinating that is, that this photograph catches a split moment, and they are not real, because that photograph captures a moment, but in that moment you were very uniquely you at that moment. And when you look at that photograph 20 years later, you are projecting a completely different you onto that photograph. And most of the time, you don't have any recollection of who you were in that photo or what the experience was of that photo. I'm thinking of one where I was 2 years old, sitting on a table at my grandmother's house, being cutting my own birthday cake and having a big mess of it. Now, I have absolutely no recollection, obviously, of that 2 years old. Yet there's a photo. And it's funny how much of me I can see in that photo. Now, is it there or is it not there? Is it just a projection? Who can say? And so he takes these photographs and he arranges them. He gives them a different context. Most of the time, when we look at pictures, they're just kind of either in a book that we're turning the pages, or they're in a stack that we're just kind of flipping through them. And he wants to put them on the wall that causes you to be in all different uh, perspectives in order to see them, and to see them in relationship to one another. And all of that creates a new narrative. Is it real? Is it true? You certainly can point it at existing things and say it's true. You can certainly hold any one of these pictures as markers and explain the narrative as you move through it. But what in your life is true and what isn't true? One of my experiences with Brigitte was in 2000, or not 2000, in 1990. I went to visit her in Germany. It had been 12 years since I'd seen her. And we took a walk down a country road that she and I used to always, there were several things down that road. There was a woods that we used to play in. There was a lake that we used to play in. There was a stream that we used to play in. Yeah, and so we had walked that road hundreds of times as friends. And of course, as we're walking down memory lane. And and after it was over, actually, when I was on the airplane flying back from Germany, I was sitting there thinking about it and how odd it was that most of her memories, and I'll say all of her memories, actually was the experience, which is why it made an impact on me, were things I barely could even remember, even as she described them. Like, most of them would flicker something. I'd be like, oh God, yeah, I never remembered that. I didn't bring that memory with me. And her reaction was the same to many of mine. And I thought about that. Which one is real? Is her version of our relationship real? Or is my version of our relationship real? And you start putting things like that together and you start understanding what the sages are saying. By this world is not real. There is no substance here. It is a reflection, an ephemeral reflection of something that is too extreme and too magnificent, too large to actually be caught, to be defined, to have a boundary here. It's beautiful. He dyes tones with tea, paints on and tears his photograph. His subjects include still lifes, nudes, and landscapes. And so, he takes a photograph, which is supposed to be a record of something that happened, and changes it. Changes it in this moment. He takes this beautiful tree here and gives it a soul, actually, in a way, gives it a luminescent being. That's gorgeous. And yet everything about it is artificial. Interesting. It's a bonsai tree. Everything there is artificial. That tree is not natural at any level. It's completely tended, completely a manufactured image, as is a photograph. And then that photograph, by painting it with tea or coloring it or highlighting it, he's demonstrating that projection that we, in the moment, place on a static image and give it meaning and assign it a narrative and make it part of our story. And yet it's completely changed, and it's completely not representative of what was. It's only representative of what is. And that brings us to that idea that there is no past. There's only the present. And when you bring a memory into your mind, it's not any longer a memory of the past. It is now an object in the present. And it will be worked on, and it will be manipulated, and it will be changed by the present. And so the past that we're so comfortable with does not exist until we bring it into the present. And you cannot bring it into the present without changing it, without it becoming something different. This is a wonderful painting, number 1275. From Yanomoto's series Nazakura. The word Nazakura derives from Buddhism and describes varied states of in-betweenness, emptiness, floating, a liminal zone between sky and earth, where the birds fly,
Yeah.
indecision.
Yeah, that's stunning, Swami. Just
Yeah.
stunning. Woo.
Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful.
And so once again, you see that no boundary.
Mm-hmm.
You know that there's a sky at the top, you know there's water at the bottom, but you can't see where they meet or where they divide. And so your mind will assign a place for that. And that's how the mind works. You know, the fascinating thing about boundaries is exactly that. In the world of physics, you know, I remember the first time I learned in in astronomy actually that there were micro particles, or you know, that were flying through the universe at ungodly speeds. And at this very moment, they're flying not only through me, but through the entire planet without touching anything. Because we're primarily space, you know, that you get small enough, you can fly right through a human being without touching anything or even knowing that you're inside of a human being. And so these unnatural boundaries that we've established that we think are so absolute are only conditionally absolute, only conditionally exist. That everything flows together because the truth of it all is one without a second. That there is no division. You know, and again, go to that dream state. You know, in the dream state, there's a wall there. What's that wall composed of? What is making that wall a boundary? What is making that wall impassable? It's only a thought. It exists only in the mind, and yet you cannot go through it. You cannot break through it in there. And so I love this exploration of that, of where are we? What are we? You know, and am I too much to be defined?
Mhm.
Is that the trouble? You know,
Ooh.
here we go.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Again,
Beautiful.
another stand of trees with the stars behind, you know, with the boundaries removed. There's no earth for those trees. They're suspended in space,
Mm-hmm.
sharing the space with the stars. Or here, another bonsai tree with a bird in it.
Mm-hmm.
And again, those boundaries and the snow blanketed around it. Just catching that moment,
Mm-hmm.
putting those conditions.
Oh, fascinating.
Yeah,
Just fascinating.
yeah. You can sit and look at that for a long time.
Ooh,
It'll
yeah.
take you lots of different places.
That's stunning. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. This one I liked because this is directly reminiscent of that of Ramakrishna's first experience of ecstasy. When he was walking across a field, he looked up and he saw a flock of cranes flying against a storm cloud. And the beauty that he saw was so overwhelming that he dropped his bag of puffed rice and passed out and fell to the ground. It had to be carried home by the women that were working in the rice field where he passed out. And so here you've got that image caught. I couldn't pass it up.
That's beautiful.
And it's that liminal space again, which in spiritual life we have to get used to that space, because that's where we exist in deep meditation. Because we are one of those unboundaried gradients from the absolute to the ephemeral. It's like, depending on if you are completely worldly, completely bought into the existence of body and mind, then you're very much on this plane, in this place. And yet with practice, you can go way beyond, like you see what happened to a Thakur or Rama or Jesus. We can see the world completely other, or not see it at all. And so really a human being is this liminal space. It is the absolute of seemingly concrete of the material world. And it's also the completely undefined something that we can only point at and say that. We can't define it, we can't name it, we can't see it, we can't understand it. And yet there's a knowing somehow from the sages that they've known this more absolutely than they've known any fact that happened in the mind.
And looking at his photography, it takes you out of the rational. You have to look at this and experience it, but I can't really describe it. You're describing it, but he really forces a change in, I guess, perception or something to truly get, I'm not saying it correctly, Swami, but it's not rational.
Yeah.
That's why you like it. We can just, you can write papers on it and talk about it for hours, and then, or you can say nothing and just, it's really quite profound.
It is profound. It is profound. And it really opens you up inside to look at it, because it's not bounded. It's not, it's not defined. You're not sure what you're looking at for a moment.
Exactly.
As you look at it. And then as you look at it, so much comes into play inside, all of this, you feel all these doors open.
Yeah, the doors open. Yes. Yeah. And you have to experience. Yes. Yes. Yeah. He's really something.
He is just wonderful.
Okay. All right. Open mind. Yeah. See?
Yeah. So he says, when I photograph, I start out with an open mind. If I start out with a precise idea of what I want to photograph, I might miss an interesting event or object. So I begin with an open mind and try to photograph all kinds of objects. What a great lesson for living that is. That's the practice of the presence right there.
Yeah.
That's coming into the moment without a goal, without an idea of what it is, and just being open-minded, accepting the entire universe as it is, and responding, not reacting to it. So this wonderful notion. So he's taken a picture of a bird from the back.
Yeah. Look at that.
Yeah. A lot of fun things you could say about that.
Oh, stunning, just stunning. But yeah. No idea. Because you will miss an interesting event or object if you try to focus in and describe or say this or say that or feel this, then you basically, it's lost.
Okay. Absolutely. Yeah. If you walk into a situation and define it, that's the way it is. I use that conversation or that example of I just got distracted and it flew right out of my head.
Oh, okay. You use an example of,
Oh, the time I was walking through the living room in one of the monasteries I've been in, and there was a devotee who was rather troublesome, rather cantankerous,
right.
but I had never really made any statement or consideration about them. And I was walking through the living room, and they were sitting there in the chair, and my mind said to me, "Oh, I don't like that person." And I walked through the door into what was just the monastery section of the building, and I stopped and I replayed the whole scene that had just happened in my mind. And I really chastised myself because I said, look at that. Until this moment, every time you saw this person, they were just who they were. You know, they started out from zero. They could be anything for you. And I said, now you've defined them. Now you've made a statement about them. And now every time you see them, they have to dig themselves out of a hole because you've put them in a negative space that they have to overcome now. And so I think, that is losing the open mind. When we make judgments, when we see things
Exactly.
incorrectly, when we have goals that are our own, when we have desires that we're chasing after, all of those things close an open mind, and you stop seeing after a while, and life becomes very mundane,
Mhm.
becomes very, very tightly defined, and horribly unfulfilling.
Mhm.
And it becomes a trap. It becomes a trap. Now, fortunately, somehow our spirit has built in protections so that when we get in that space, we break it because we can't live there. We can't live in that tightness.
Mhm.
So suffering comes into play.
Exactly.
So here we have an artist, Hiroshi Sugimoto, called Between Sea and Sky. He's very, very similar to our previous artist in that he's experimenting with these boundaries, but he does it in a wonderfully beautiful way. So he takes pictures of seascapes. And so he says when he creates his seascapes, he always tries to capture air and water in equal halves, applying a constant method of always splitting the frame equally between sea and sky. When you look up at outer space, there's the moon and the stars, but on the surface of the earth, the farthest place people can see is a sea's horizon. Right? He makes another statement. I think he makes it in the next slide, but I'm going to bring it up now because it's a wonderful point, and it's one of those things that you can sit on the beach and really ponder about. He posits that this is the only view that we actually still share with the ancients. There's nothing else in the world that we can look at where the view is exactly as it has always been. And so he really likes that timeless feature of this meeting of two infinites.
Mhm.
The meeting of the ocean is always a symbol of infinity for us, and then the sky, of course, always another symbol. And so here you have a boundaried uh, example of two infinities coming together outside of time, unaffected by time, you know. And again, these things, it's unnecessary to say it over and over, but that is the human condition. We are living on a non-existent boundary
Mhm.
between the unlimited, the infinite spirit and the infinite manifestation. And we are the boundary. That sense of me is the boundary. But that sense of me, that ego me, like Ramakrishna says, peel it like an onion, go looking for your ego. You will not find a boundary. You will not find that line. So it's a wonderfully profound way of demonstrating this, of depicting this. Sugimoto argues that seascapes are also pivotal in that they are the only scenery that we in our modern world still share with the ancients. Resources are limited, so inevitably they will run out. In order to face a failure likely to happen in the near future, we should see once again the seascapes that the ancients saw, to revert us to our innocent mind. So my work hopefully gives us an opportunity to think before destroying ourselves. You know? So this wonderful dismantling of that destructive ego self, going back to what we are, to the essence of who and what we are, as a means of not destroying ourselves, you know, not being undone by our own conditions.
I love innocent minds.
Yes,
Yeah.
I do like that. That's a gift from the Vedanta,
Right.
from Eastern thinking. You know, in Western thinking, we start from the fall of Adam. So we're all sinners, you know, we have nothing good about ourselves. But in Vedanta, we start from the very beginning, where we are the divine itself. And our nature is not sinful, impossible. That's heresy, even. Our nature is divine. Our nature is Satchitananda, that love, that wisdom, that being. So, yes, very good point. That we start from innocence and we return to our innocence. Here's another picture of his. So you just get the expansive feeling of it. And again, the meeting of the sky and the water, but no boundary visible. Just that falling into it. Your attention somehow goes right into that.
Right.
Wonderful, wonderful meditation picture.
Yes.
Swami, Sara.
Yeah.
Hi there. How about, Swami, the whole idea about this big ocean, this enormous ocean, that when we see it, it imposes us. It's a sign of greatness. But once you get in the sea, once you start swimming on it, you're just a part of it. You can forget about yourself, and you become part of that sea. As Sugimoto's pictures depict, they always, the trick that I see in his photographs is that not only you can see the view, it's not only the sea, but at some point when you're realizing what he's trying to transmit with his pictures, you become that sea.
Yeah.
You're able to go in that sea. You don't remain as an spectator. But at some point, if you keep looking at those pictures, you go into the sea.
Exactly.
That is wonderful. I mean, that is so right, because he doesn't give you a place to exist in his photo.
Exactly.
There's no outcropping, there's no focal point, there's no stable ground. You have to fall into his photograph. You are the implied photograph. You know, it's like, and that's what's so delightful to me. That's exactly how you were able to just bring that out is wonderful to me, because it helped me see when I say that this is the human condition. That's what this picture is. You know, this picture is not the sea and the sky. This picture is you and me. It's our experience of humanity. It's like we have both of these infinities meeting within us, and we can't find a boundary. We can't find the division. We can't find the ego that has made it, you know, sky and sea, or has made it this and that.
And there's no hierarchy, Swami.
No hierarchy. Yes, absolutely right. Everything of equal weight and a profound weight. There's no smallness in there, you know. So yeah, perfect, wonderful. So he is in an interview in Gadabout magazine. Do ideas pop up all the time? He says, yes. Ideas keep hitting me constantly. I'm 64 now and kind of learned how to keep them flowing. The technique I recently employ is maintaining a jet lag for as long as I can.
Oh,
Now listen to this practice. He says
yeah.
that to start it off funny, but this practice is directly out of out of a description of a monastic life. The technique I recently employ is maintaining a jet lag for as long as I can. I try to stay sharp from midnight to early morning, a time when everyone is asleep but me. That's the best moment to hatch many ideas. The moment of clarity. Yes, clarity of the mind. So I sleep in the daytime and I stay awake in the night. That's a direct description of the ancient sages. You know, when everyone else is awake, I am asleep. When they are asleep, I am awake. You know, that stillness of the night is perfect for practice. And you know, here he as an artist, as a practice, you know, has stumbled on that same truth and found that clarity of mind. You know. But that's another one of those boundaries between day and night that's never really quite here. You know, is how night becomes day and day becomes night, how gentle it is and changing and yet constant enough that we rely on it.
Mm.
Uh, those three are in the gallery wall together. Marvelous. Just again, playing with boundary, playing with limit, depicting the infinite in a bounded a bounded state. You know, what is it? Just like Jose's work earlier last week when that
Mhm.
print cut in half. Is it one? Is it two? Is it three? Is it not three? But where is infinity? Question
Mm.
the perspective on infinity. So these are his same photograph or his photographs. All right. But he says, one day I simply turned it around. Suddenly it was no longer the view of the moon from the earth. It became a view of the moon from a spaceship hanging over the earth. If he turned around his photos of the moon and the sea, Sugimoto realized he could gain a cosmic vision. And thus, in 1980, a new series was created in which he intentionally looks at his photos in a vertical way.
Mm. Wow.
And once again, absolutely true. They become something other. And this, you know, when I read this, when I was sitting and contemplating these pictures, actually from the pictures first, and then I found the quote later, is this notion that just your perspective determines what you see. And so your day, you know, there's this very important lesson that I've learned over the years in my practice, and that is nothing has a value, positive or negative, until it meets you. And your idea of self is going to determine the value of that, whatever it is, when it meets you, when it touches you. And so here he's exhibiting this very notion that if you take the perspective, the normal perspective, you know, flatten, lay those 90 degrees to the left and look at them, they become very much like his other pictures, with the exception that one's got the sun and one's got the moon in it here. But nonetheless, the meaning is very different. One, you're on the planet, you're bounded and contained by the restrictions and limitations of the planet, of the world that you're in. This one, you've broken that restriction. You're not on the planet. You're out there. And I think that, you know, I could very easily get us to buy into the idea of these being photographs of the realized horizon. The person who's not bounded by a perspective anymore, by an absolute. He's ever free. And so everything is as he wants it to be. You know, it's like he can be this perspective, that perspective, all perspectives. Doesn't become anything until it meets you. And so know who you are, and in that is your freedom. You will not be bounded or caught or trapped by a particular perspective. So another one, this one, he kind of captures that interstitial space almost completely here. You get half a sun on the right and half a horizon on the left, or a sliver of both. So this picture is actually a picture of the in-between. It's not a picture of
Exactly.
either. So,
Wow.
all right, this is a marvel. Why is a photographer of the ocean and the sky and of, ephemeral nature now taking the picture of an internal space of a theater? And actually what he did for these pictures, so he went into a theater and he opened the aperture on his lens. I think that's the word. He opened the film to the room and left it open the entire time a movie was played on the screen. So these pictures are what a movie looks like in its entirety. And what does it look like? White light, undefined, open space. And so this is marvelous as an example of the mind, your life. What is your life? It's pure light, pure love, pure existence, pure bliss. But you're watching the whole movie. You're seeing it there, but the sum total of it is light, is love. And so here, and from that light, what do you see? You see your perspective. It illumines where the point at where you're sitting to watch your mind. The definition of self, the theater of self that you've got for yourself, where you sit, that determines the meaning of the movie. That determines the experience that you're having. But the end of it, the end of the thing, the summary of life is that it is an experience of light.
Beautiful.
All
Beers
yeah.
are so beautiful.
Yeah.
And don't you at some point you feel that like in that particular picture, it's same on Sama Suka Duka. No, there's no once you start adding all the small brights that the camera got, it just becomes even. It's only light.
Yeah.
There must have been dark frames in that picture. There
Oh,
must be
sure.
dark days in our lives. But once you step back and you see it, that's the sameness that that Vedanta talks about. At least I feel like that.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. 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 That this is the illumined perspective of life. You're not trapped in any particular. You're not trapped in any perspective. You see the whole, and you know the whole to be divine. And what is there but beauty? It illuminates the beauty of the material, this theater, the lines, all of that can be seen because of the nature of the movie, not because of the story of the movie, not because of the particulars of the movie, but because of the whole movie. The whole beauty can be illumined, can be seen, can be experienced without being trapped, without being caught. It's a marvelous way to make such an immense statement, to capture such an immense truth in such a straightforward and understandable way. Movies are as good as dreams for talking about Vedanta.
Yeah.
In a movie there is no change, actually. Nothing is moving. You're only getting one snapshot after another, and the mind creates movement. And so your mind creates story. Your mind creates the particulars that you have to suffer through. Right? But to the illumined soul who's been able to let go of ego, let go of the particular, to see the whole, to see the unity, Life is just beautiful. God everywhere present and always perfect. It's that experience of being. So I just ended by coming back to that light,
Mhm.
the light of our movie, the light of enlightenment. Jose, before you came, this is one of the early photos, and this image is directly out of the 10 stages of enlightenment, story of the bull in Zen Buddhism. And the last picture in that series of carvings from the 1200s is this circle of light. This is a photograph, but the circle of light is that definition of enlightenment, of the enlightened self. And so, all right, that
Beautiful. Thank you, Swami.
that
Wow.
is it.
Wow.
Wonderful food for thought. And just not even thought, not food for thought, food for experience,
Yeah.
intuition. What's the other word? Discernment. It's different. Anyway.
Yeah, all of those things. And you know, this is what I love about this exercise, is this is how we learn to see. You know, every turn anywhere in your room right now and look, and these things will be evident there also. You know, perhaps not as cleanly displayed, but certainly still true. You know, there is an ephemeral nature to what seems concrete in the moment, you know, especially when you come to realize that the room that you're sitting in, if you go back 100 years, you're probably sitting in a field.
Mhm.
You know, go forward 100 years, where will you be sitting? And yet, for this moment, this is your boundaried home, as secure and safe as you can get in this world. And yet, where is the boundary? You know? So,
Well, thank you.
yes.
The beautiful thing in these classes is that it allows us to play, you know.
Mm,
At some points it gets so serious and so intellectual, and so sometimes you're just unable sometimes to connect. And when you're dealing with art, especially the seeing it through Swami's eyes,
Mhm.
it has no other form but to become playful,
yes.
to become art,
Ah,
joy, no matter how the sorrow that it represents sometimes, but
Yeah.
it just brings you back to that ability we have to play,
Mhm.
Yes, that's
to
exactly
the
it.
to the child that it's playing with those ceramics and the sunflowers and coloring them, and
That-
it just it
That's
just
it. See, that's my love of spiritual life, is that's what it's trying to give us back again.
Mhm.
You know, that joy of life, that joy of being, that mystery of everything being unknown and yet safe because of its nature of love. You know, so that we can live in this starry-eyed, playful mystery and not be afraid.
Mhm.
You know,
yeah.
not be afraid. So, all right.
Well,
Well,
thank you.
yeah, thank you. It
Thank you.
was wonderful.
It's just wonderful, Swami. Wow, just
All right.
great.
Be well.
Be well, everybody. Take care.
Bye
Thank
bye.
you. Bye-bye.